go back. I want to talk to you a little bit about your book, Saving Leonardo, because I finished it before I read Love Thy Body, and I absolutely loved Saving Leonardo. Not just because as an artist and as a musician, it speaks a lot to the things that I was interested in and that I grew up really loving, but also because you write about how art and culture reflect one another. And I don't think that a lot of people, that while they wouldn't consider themselves art critics, that they would be able to quickly identify how they can use a Christian worldview to interpret the things that are being communicated to them through art, through music, through television, and movies. And what are ways that we can talk to each other? What are ways that we can talk to our kids? What are ways that we can share our faith when we're looking at things that are in the arts?
Yeah, this again, was part of the Schaffer legacy. He was one of the first people in the Christian world to say we need to have a Christian worldview understanding of the arts. He encouraged a lot of Christians to go into the arts, but also to treat the arts as sort of a way to have the pulse, your finger on the pulse of the culture. Like art also reveals a worldview. And I find that even in Christian circles, it's sometimes hard to get people to understand that because they've been so influenced by a romantic view of the arts, romantic as in capital R, romantic, the romantic period, which taught that art was just about internal feelings. And, I'm just expressing my feelings. And that's actually not true. If you look at it historically, you can see that every major art movement was influenced by some philosophy. And it's a wonderful way to learn both philosophy and art history at the same time. I am teaching this book right now, by the way, Saving Leonardo. I'm teaching in my class right now at HBU.
Awesome.
And students who get through it have a very good introduction to philosophy and introduction to art history as well. And I have a digital study guide that also has links to music. So we get the whole, thing.
That's kind of awesome.
That's a well-rounded education.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. One of my students who is an undergraduate, it was his last semester. And he finished the course and he said, I feel like I've become an educated person. and it's true. And that's the goal. Christians should be educated persons. So in Saving Leonardo, let me see if I can give you an example, just because an example speaks louder than words. So everybody knows what a cubist painting is,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
Picasso, right?
Yeah, like Picasso.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like Picasso, breaking things down into little squares and rectangles. Then you say, well, but why? Why did they think that's what a painting should be? Well, it turns out that they were influenced by a philosophy called rationalism that says, the most certain form of knowledge we have is mathematics, geometry. Mathematics was mostly defined as geometry back to the ancient Greeks, Pythagoras, the guy who we named the
theorem.
Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah.
I know
back
this.
to Pythagoras. It had been thought that that mathematics and geometry gives us the sort of the hidden blueprint of the universe.
You're right.
So the rationalists were trying to say, if we could just break everything down into the underlying geometric structure, that will give us this sort of mystical insight into the blueprint that underlies all of reality. So that's what they were saying with Cubist art. They weren't saying, oh, this is pretty, because if you look at a Cubist painting, a lot of times it's not aesthetically beautiful.
Right.
It was, but they didn't care. That was not their main point. Their main point was to give expression to a rationalist worldview. So that helps a lot as Christians, try to make sense of the images around them. A lot of them have a history like that, where they grew out of the attempt to express some sort of worldview, and to be well-rounded Christians, we really should learn the language of the arts. In other words, every art has a language, right? A language of sounds. If it's music, it's a language of sounds, a language of images, a language of composition, the composition of a painting, and so on. And I think it's imperative for Christians to learn that language, so that we can recognize worldviews when they come to us, not necessarily in words, where they're easier to recognize, but when they come to us through images and sounds and music and so on. We should know how to read the worldviews that come to us in these artistic forms.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes me like Picasso more or less, knowing that. I remember a few years ago I had the opportunity to go to Spain, and the giant painting Guernica, like, we were standing in front of it, and it's huge. It's the size of a wall. And each one of the different things that was represented there and a part of it, and there were people that were trying to tell us, like, no, this is how Picasso felt about the world. But what you're saying is that this is Picasso trying to express how he felt about the world, but from a philosophical standpoint, not like expressing the inner feelings that he has. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And one of the things that's so important to recognize is that people think saying that the artist is just expressing his feelings, that didn't really happen until the Romantic movement. And not all artists accepted that. Not all artists accept it today. Many artists today are still, you know what, you can think of it as the same divide. Remember we were talking about the two-story divide that came from Francis Shaffer. Well, once your concept of truth is divided, everything is divided. And so, you know, when I was writing Saving Leonardo, I didn't necessarily expect to find it there. You know, I wasn't trying to impose this on everything I studied. But the first book I picked up in my research, it was by Jacques Bauzon, who's a very well-respected intellectual historian. I picked up the first book, and it said modern art has split into two streams. And he called it the naturalist stream, which is obviously the lower story, and then the idealist stream, which is the upper story. And I thought, oh my goodness, here it is again. And sure enough, as I continued to research, you could find there were artists who were trying to express a very naturalistic view of the world. So that would be Cubism would be an example, because they're being influenced by rationalism. And
Right.
then there's sort of the upper story, which is Romanticism. And it's the Romantics who said, oh no, we're not trying to portray anything objective. We're trying to just convey our inner subjective experience. But both of those both of those streams are still in existence today. And it'll be a whole lot easier when you try to make sense of modern art to recognize, okay, for Picasso, he's trying to portray something objective about the structure of the universe. But if you go to Mark Rothko, say, Mark Rothko has a chapel here in Houston.
Okay.
It's called the Roth. You guys are from Texas. You may have heard of the Rothko Chapel.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So Mark Rothko is an upper story artist. So he's trying to convey some kind of a mystical experience, and he's decided that he investigated. He has a Jewish background,
Okay.
so he investigated all the religions that he was, basically all the major religions, and finally decided that any one concept of the divine is too narrow, is too restrictive, and so he paints these huge single color canvases. And I took some students to the Rothko Chapel, and they're like, what is this? It's just huge single color panels.
Right.
They were ready to leave in less than 5 minutes because it's not visually interesting.
Right.
They're all the same color, and they're all one color, and they're all the same color. So I had to tell them, okay, to get into this, you have to know what he's trying to say. What he's trying to say is that any one concept of the divine is too restrictive, and therefore we have to somehow convey that ultimate reality has no boundaries, has no limits, has no defining features. And you realize, of course, that after Mark Rothko painted those panels, before the museum even opened, he committed suicide.
Whoa.
Because a concept of the divine that is impersonal and completely undefined is not enough to answer the need of the human heart. The person who commissioned the paintings was asked, what are they about? And she said, this is a direct quote, she said, he's trying to paint the silence of God, the unbearable silence of God. Hello, I'm Nancy Pearcey. I'm a scholar in residence and professor of apologetics at Houston Baptist University. And here's why you should never listen to the Reverend and Reprobate show ever.